Hello, this is Ananya, and in today's class we'll be studying about functions in Python. Now today we'll be concentrating only on inbuilt functions because in the next lecture we'll be studying about strings in Python, which deals with the maximum knowledge about inbuilt functions. So let's just get started. Okay, so we have been introduced to functions in some of our previous lectures. If you have visited them, if you have seen my previous lectures on loops, you might know at least one function, that is the range function. Okay, so what we were doing in range is we were applying the for loop to it, and depending on the range that we want to provide to the loop, we were using the range function. Okay, so let us get a little extra knowledge on functions today so that we can go ahead and do well with strings. Alright, now what are functions? Functions are basically blocks of code that perform a task that the coder wants it to perform. Okay, now functions may be either user defined or it may be inbuilt. Now what are inbuilt functions? Inbuilt functions are what the Python interpreter or Python provides us. It is, the code is written for you already. You do not have to exclusively write any piece of code. You just call the function. Okay, you call it, either you give some parameter inside it or you don't, and accordingly it will perform the task for you automatically when called. So inbuilt functions means you just have to call it, you do not have to write any exclusive code for it. Okay, now functions function only when you call it. Okay, if you do not call it, it will just stay there, nothing will happen. So why use functions? Why not just write the code just like that? Why do you need functions? Functions, as I said, they are certain blocks or pieces of code. Okay, so whenever you have to write a very long code, whenever you become quite experienced with programming and you try making various projects and you you work with a large group of people and make a certain project work or make an application, you have to use a very long code. Okay, so at that point of time, if you put everything in the main function, like everything is just written one after the other, and you make a 300 line code and you give it to some other a member of your group to try and to get to know about what is happening, he or she will go crazy as to what you have exactly written. It's going to be impossible for that person to actually go through 300 lines of code and understand what is happening. So just to make it friendly between your group members and to also make the code precise and crisp, we use functions. So you have each action that you want the code to perform written separately in certain blocks. Okay, now blocks doesn't mean something very hi-fi. It's simply just, let's take this example such as sum. Okay, we have this sum function, you give the parenthesis and inside it you might pass some variable or you might not pass some variable, and you just give some lines of code. So sum will basically be, you want to add a range or a list of numbers. That's it. That's what a block means. So functions make the program very crisp and precise and very neat. You maximum of functions are used when you are making a huge code. And also, of course, it is a very good practice to make use of functions in your program rather than writing the entire piece of code one after the other sequentially. Okay, now we got to know what are inbuilt functions. So I'm repeating once again, inbuilt functions are just to be called and you do not have to write any exclusive piece of program for that. And okay, and we got to know what is parameterized and non-parameterized functions. If you are confused, no problem. We'll be looking at all of these examples so that your doubts are cleared. You all can get to know what is parameterized and non-parameterized there. And these are a few of the inbuilt functions that Python provides us. These are just very few. You have so many of them provided to you. You cannot know everything at once. Gradually, whenever you need to perform a certain action, you can go to the Python documentation and have a look at it, study about it, and use it accordingly. Everything cannot be done at once, right? So this is how you define a function. You have to provide this parenthesis here. That is a must. That's how the interpreter understands that it's a function. So just now I said that there are loads of functions, that inbuilt functions that Python provides us. So how do we get to know about all the inbuilt methods? Let's have a look. There's a very simple function that you call to get to know about your inbuilt functions and what action they provide us with. So let me just run it for you. I run that function for you and show it to you. Okay. So let me just create a new file. And let's name it functions.py. And now I want to know about all these built-in functions that Python provides us. So I'll just give a dir function here. Now this is actually a directory that is going to give me all the names of the methods that is provided. So what I say is, I'm actually giving an init or self function here. We shall be studying about this later on, so don't get too confused with this. And I'm going to say built-ins. Okay, you already have it here. And now I want to print this. Okay, since this is an IDE, you have to exclusively print it. If you're working on Python shell, then that's not necessary. You just simply say dir built-ins and you'll get your result. Maybe I'll just show it to y'all in the shell also, because here it's going to be a little difficult for y'all to see all the methods and like see the output properly, because the console is very small here. Let me just run it here. I'll show it to y'all there again. See, you get all of these methods. You might know a few of them, you might not know. See, it's really small. That's what I was talking about. Let's see if I can find something similar for us. Maybe something that we have already done before. See, it's all very it's all in a single line. That's why, see, you all might have, we had used list once. We have also used length, I suppose. See, these are your functions given to you. You have max, you have print. See, our basic function that we use every single day, that is print. Okay. Now let me just run it on a shell and show it, and then you all might be able to see the output properly. I hope you all can see it. I hope it's big enough. Okay, so we had dir of built-ins, right? See, here you don't have to print it. Okay, just hit enter. There you go, you have all your functions and methods given to you all. Look, we're going to see sum, then see you've got range here, and we previously saw print, right? Now we'll be looking at many of these, and okay, don't get too confused. You know about float also. We had used float while we were doing our first few lectures on data types and typecasting, and we'll be looking at all of this, all, any, max, minimum, all of this. Okay, and right now what we'll be using is help. What help does is it basically gives you an idea, or basically a Python documentation about certain classes or about certain functions. So let me just type it here itself. Let me say help of str. Now str is basically your string class. So help of the string class will provide you with all the methods that you can apply with a string. Okay, let me just, okay, see, you have many here. You have add, then you have format. We'll be going through what format is. You have all the, now remember I was talking about parameterized and non-parameterized constructors, so not constructors, sorry, methods. So this is what you have a certain variable or a certain list, anything that you need to pass through to the function so that it can perform actions on it, So we'll be looking at all of this. You will be seeing is alpha, then formatting, then is lower, is upper, all of this. And you can get a Python documentation also like this. It tells you what the function does for you. So is upper basically returns you a boolean value if all the uppercase, if all the characters or letters in the string are uppercase. Otherwise, even if a single one is a small letter or a lowercase letter, it's going to return you false. So this is how, using the help function, you can get to know about all the methods that a certain class provides you with. Okay, so you have lot of it, you've lots of them. You have join, lower, many of them. So you can either go through them and then later on try out each function by yourself, but that won't be necessary really, because whenever you need it, you can just type help str and you can get all the documentation that you need. Okay, so now that we know about how to get to know about all the the methods and about all the inbuilt functions, let's just try out a few examples. All right, let's just try out a couple of functions or inbuilt functions that Python provides us with. Let's try out any, the function any, and the function all. So what it'll be doing is, let's take a list. Okay, now you might or might not know what a list is, but a list is basically a data type which can store any other data type. Like a list can have a string or an integer, a float, or maybe a list inside again. We'll be studying about lists and user defined functions next. So for now, let's just understand that list is also a sort of data type which stores every possible data type inside it, separated by commas. Now let's take the list as 3, 5.5 and hello. Okay, now list is again an inbuilt function, so you cannot use the name list itself, you just need to modify it. Let's say list1. Now what I want to do is, I want to print any and I want to pass the list 1 inside it. Now what the function any does is, if any single element of this list is true, it will return true. Okay, so for example, let's just give another element as 0. So 0 is basically false, right? So even if a single element is positive, it's true, it's going to return true to you. Let's try this out now. See, it gives you a true. Now let's try another thing. Let's give all the values as 0. Okay, let's remove all of this and let's give 2 zeros and let's see what it gives us. See, you have false. Since every element inside this list is false, any means anyone should be true, minimum anyone, but since nothing is true here, it gives you a false. Similarly, let's try the function all. What all does is, each and every value inside the list should be true. Even if a single one is false, it will return false to you. Let's try the same thing. All of the elements being false. See, it gives you false. Now let's just enter one positive element. It'll still be false because everything except for the 5 is false here. Now let's remove this, remove all the false values and give all positive values. You get a true here. Okay, so this is how we can try out any and all functions. They are quite you might be confused as to why we'll be using them, but that's basically used during data mining, and if you have a single none value in your data that you want to check, if there is any false value in your data set, you can check it using the all function and then you can remove it accordingly. Okay, now that we have seen any and all functions, let's try out a function called sum. Okay, now what sum will be doing is, or maybe hold on, let's just try out the any or the all function. Let's try out the all function using a string. Okay, we have seen lists, but since we are very familiar with strings, let's try it out with a string. Let's say hello there. Okay, now let's see what any or all gives us with a string. Okay, we'll say print all of str1. It gives us true since every element in here is true. Now what if we give 0? Okay, let's try giving 0. You might think it will give us false, but let's see if that is correct. Well, it does not give us false. Now why? You might wonder, because you have an element inside the string. 0 here is also considered as a string, okay, not a false value. Hence, if you apply 0 to a string and then you check for all function, you will get a true. Okay, now we're done with any and all. Let's go ahead with the sum function. Now again, let's take a list and inside it let's store numbers. Now this function sum will basically add numbers for you, and you cannot give a string inside the list because the sum function doesn't deal with strings. Okay, we have 8, 3, that gives us 11, and 16, 16.5, and let's give 3.5. Okay, now what I want to do is, I want to say print the sum of the above list. So you take the sum function, and inside it you pass the parameter the list. Okay, you pass the list inside it. That will be your parameter. So you get your answer as 20. Okay, it adds all these numbers for you and gives you the answer. Now, just as I said, we are not writing any exclusive code here. We are simply just calling the function and passing a parameter to it. Okay, now we are done with any, all and sum. Let's check out length now. Now what does length do? It basically gives you the length of a string. Okay, or maybe a length of a list also. So let's try out str1 is equal to, again, by. Okay, this time let's say by. See, whenever you give this wrong indentation by mistake, Python gives you an error here. Okay, it will tell you encountered an indent. Why? Because this doesn't really happen in other languages very often, but in Python indentation is super important. Anywhere you go wrong, Python will throw an error to you. And now I want to say print length of str1, right? We have taken that. Okay, now it should give us 4, right? Because if you have B, Y, E and an exclamation mark, which makes 4 characters, so the length is 4. You have 4 here. Okay, this is how the length function works. Now that we know about length and sum, let's try out a simple program. Okay, now the program will be finding the mean of this list. I want to find the mean of this list. How do we find the mean? We basically take the sum of all the elements and divide it by the number of elements present inside that list. That's how we do it, right? So let us store in the variable sum. Look carefully, I'm taking a capital S. You cannot take a small s because that will become an inbuilt symbol. Okay, that will again throw an error to you. So in the variable sum, I'll be storing sum of list. Okay, and next what I'll be doing is, in the variable mean, I'll be storing sum divided by length of that list. So basically the length of the list will give you how many elements you have inside it, that is 4. So we are doing 20 divided by 4. Now I'll say print mean. It gives us 5. Okay, so 20 divided by 4 gives us 5. The mean is 5. Okay, now we understood about, we saw all these functions. We tried out a simple program also. Now this is all about functions that I have, or maybe let's try out another function. No issue. Let's try out the max and minimum functions. We'll have a little more exposure to it then. I want to print the max element from this list. So print max. See, in case you do not know about any function, whenever you type it, you get a simple, explanation about it. You can read and go through it and understand. Okay, Python has documentations ready for you to understand and read. So list s, we'll be passing it and we want to print it. Okay, so you see the maximum element here is 8, so it gives us 8. Let's try out minimum also. So it should give us 3, right? It gives us 3. So we've tried out so many examples and we've gone through functions. We have seen all of this, right? We have all, any, max, min, length and sum. We saw all of this. Now that you are familiar with using inbuilt functions, it's not an issue for you anymore. We shall now go ahead with studying operations on strings. And we have used strings a lot previously while taking inputs and printing them, all of that. Now we shall perform operations on strings, okay, such as slicing and formatting. We shall see all of this in detail. So we are done with functions, inbuilt functions, that is. So next time I'll meet you all with string operations. Okay, bye bye and see you soon.